Everybody keeps talking about Northwest Arkansas becoming a region of more than 1 million people. And depending on where you live, it already feels like we're headed there very quickly. But I've got a different question. Are we actually becoming a 1 million person metropolitan area, or are we simply putting 1 million people into an area that still has an infrastructure and amenities designed for a much smaller population? Because, my friend, those are two completely different things. So today I want to look at some areas where Northwest Arkansas is doing exceptionally well, but also some places where I think we're already behind or could easily fall behind if the growth continues anywhere close to what's projected. My friend, if we haven't had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Anthony Mosley. I'm a real estate broker right here in Northwest Arkansas, in Bentonville, and I help people just like you decide, after presenting them the facts, is Northwest Arkansas going to be the next best place for you and your family to call home, or not?
Your call, buddy.
Let's go ahead and get the obvious one out of the way, and that is our road system. If you've tried to get through parts of Bentonville, Centerton, Rogers, Springdale at 5 o'clock lately, or even in the morning in rush hour, you don't need a transportation study to know that Northwest Arkansas is far behind when it comes to road infrastructure. The real issue is that Northwest Arkansas developed largely as a collection of small towns as opposed to one region cohesively working together for road infrastructure and how roads flow from one city to the next. That means transportation decisions historically happened city by city. But somebody living in Centerton may go to work in Bentonville, have dinner in Rogers, have a kid playing soccer in Springdale, and go to a Razorback game in Fayetteville, all in the same day. But that's a metropolitan lifestyle, and our transportation system and our roads increasingly need to function more like a region as opposed to a bunch of little towns. The bigger question that might be needed to ask here is, what becomes the second major north-south corridor besides I-49? The simple answer to many of us locals is, well, that kind of puts a lot of pressure on 112 to actually get developed. How do east-west roads keep up? What happens to Highway 102? What happens west of Bentonville as Centerton, Highville, and the airport corridor continue to explode? Do we eventually need to trigger true regional transit? More on that later in the video. You might be interested to know that the Northwest Arkansas Regional Planning Commission has a plan called their Forward 2050 plan that explicitly recognizes what we're talking about in this section. And they've identified that our road systems or transportation systems are going to need about $6 billion in order to achieve their Forward 2050 plan. Let's be real, we can't widen our way out of every problem. Which brings us to our next topic, which isn't just roads, it's infrastructure as a whole. If you've watched many of my recent videos, you know I'm starting to pay attention to this a lot more and hopefully get the word out and hear from a lot of you locals and natives down in the comments. Love to hear what you have to say. You're going to see it out and about a lot more than I am. I spend a lot of my time up in Benton County. You might be spending a lot of your time down in Washington County. You might be driving from Joplin, or you might be driving from Fort Smith in order to get up to work in Northwest Arkansas. Roads get a lot of the attention because that's what we see and that's what we drive on a daily basis. However, sewer lines don't. Water treatment doesn't. Stormwater doesn't. Electrical substations a bit more visible, but they don't get the attention they deserve either. Yet those systems are the ones that determine whether Northwest Arkansas can continue to grow or not. You know what's actually more important than whether they can widen a road in front of your subdivision? Whether there's enough sewer capacity for the next 4,000 houses somebody wants to build behind it. Northwest Arkansas leaders have already acknowledged this issue. Several wastewater systems are approaching capacity, and regional leaders launched a comprehensive wastewater study because projects have already been delayed or reduced due to treatment and pipeline limitations. In fact, I received a text message just this last week for mandatory water conservation. We're on Centerton Water Utilities, and so we had to not run our sprinklers. First world problems, I know, but that tells us something, that we don't have enough volume capacity coming from Beaver Lake. That's a whole other issue. We can get into some of the details, but essentially there's not enough pump stations at Beaver Lake to push the water west where people are buying it from. I do believe there is a pump station that's going to come online maybe 2027, 2028, but as of right now, there's not enough pumps to be able to push or pull the water all the way to the west side of Northwest Arkansas to keep up with demand. Some people assume that just because there's land and a zoning department, that equals development, but that's not necessarily true. You, of course, need water, wastewater capacity, roads, electricity, drainage, schools, and of course, fire and police coverage. And with all those factors in play, suddenly the conversation about 1 million people becomes a lot more complicated than simply drawing another subdivision map. All right, let's leave that be for a second. Let's talk about healthcare for a moment. Is Northwest Arkansas falling behind when it comes to healthcare? We're improving, but this may be our biggest big city gap, if you will. Now, Northwest Arkansas does have hospitals. We have Washington Regional, we have the VA hospital, we have Mercy. But having hospitals is not really the issue. What the issue truly is the depth of specialty medicine. Historically, residents have left Northwest Arkansas for certain advanced medical care in places like Little Rock, Tulsa, Kansas City, and elsewhere. I know for our family personally, we have to go down to Little Rock at least once a year to help my daughter with the mapping of her cochlear implant. The Northwest Arkansas Council previously estimated roughly $1 billion annually in out-migration healthcare. People leaving Northwest Arkansas to go get specialized care somewhere else. That's a lot of money that could stay here in Northwest Arkansas. Now, that has been reduced by about $250 million in the last recent year or so, but still, that's a lot of people leaving or needing to leave, having to leave Northwest Arkansas to get medical care. But regional leaders still specifically identified expanding specialty and subspecialty medicine as a major priority. And that's going to bring us to, of course, Alice Walton School of Medicine. There's a lot of growth that's happening there. There's the specialized care facility that's currently at earthwork stage. That said, having a hospital but a mature medical healthcare system aren't necessarily the same thing. Our population is growing disproportionately to oncology, cardiology, neurology, endocrinology, lots of other ologies that I can't say. But let's talk a minute about NICUs and trauma centers. As a reminder, trauma centers, the more intense they are, the higher the numbers. Level 1 trauma center, we don't have here in Northwest Arkansas. Versus a neonatal intensive care unit or a NICU, a level 1 is very low and then a 4 is very high. We don't have a level 4 NICU here in Northwest Arkansas. We have a very robust level 3 NICU, but again, if you're needing that specialized infant care, you're going to need to go down to Little Rock or up to St. Louis. And much like trauma center, if there's something significant that happens, you're going to need to go down to Little Rock or up to Springfield in order to get that specialized trauma care. Now, I won't say that our health care here in Northwest Arkansas is absolutely terrible. That's not the case. Hear me loud and clear. But I would say that healthcare in Northwest Arkansas is racing to catch the population. Earlier, I mentioned Alice Walton School of Medicine and other investments they're making that could fundamentally change the medical outlook here in Northwest Arkansas. I'm seeing in my research for these videos, and many people are commenting about the need for regional public transportation. Now, if you didn't know already, down in Fayetteville, there's Razorback Transit, and all the way from Fayetteville all the way up through Bentonville, Rogers, and Springdale, there is Ozark Regional Transit Authority. They have regular routes that are $0 for you to be able to go and ride their transportation. This is probably a topic that many of you are going to roll your eyes and say, oh, public transportation, really? I'm not asking you to give up your F-150 just yet, okay? But at some point, when population to population density gets to a point, when does it make sense for us to have a light rail system? Should Ozark Regional Transit add a Centerton loop, a Pea Ridge loop, or maybe even a Bella Vista loop? And maybe even a loop that takes you out to the airport, which causes me to stop here for a second. The Northwest Arkansas Regional Airport, XNA, I would say is probably one of the only areas that is far beyond not just thinking and planning, but also implementing growth for what's to come in the future for the amount of population that's headed this way. Concourse expansion is scheduled for construction from September 2026 through September 2028, which is going to add gates, passenger areas, concessions, and other capacity that was going to be needed as we continue to grow. That's actually a nice counterpoint in this video. I'd say actually XNA is a little bit ahead of the game. Back to public transportation. What I'm trying to argue here is that at a certain point, when we approach 1 million residents, we can't assume that every single trip and every single person is going to require sitting in one automobile. Certainly there's a group of people that all go to the Walmart home office. Certainly there's a group of people that all go to Tyson Foods, J.B. Hunt Transportation, University of Arkansas, in regards to their day-to-day work life. Now, granted, you start thinking about other cities. We lived in Minneapolis. We rode the train one time from the Mall of America up to Target Field to watch the Twins play a game. It was nice not to have to try to find a parking spot right around the stadium. We could park in Mall of America, hang out with our friends, grab something to eat, ride the train up, watch the game, catch the train back, and then hang out at the mall and then head home. But that's a major metropolitan area. Northwest Arkansas doesn't have that kind of population, or much less that kind of population density. That's really important when it comes to public transportation, is if we were so spread out, then we have to have these public transit routes that go all over the place. If we were a lot higher densely populated, it makes a lot more sense for public transportation. So I don't necessarily want to negate the fact that there is Ozark Regional Transit that's doing their job. But hospitality workers, students, airport employees, healthcare workers, or people that are unable to drive have an option that's going to take them in and around town. Yes, The Greenway is phenomenal, but let's be real, not everybody's going to ride their bike to work, much less be able to do it all day, every day, because it gets hot. I don't want to sit next to you if you're all sweaty in a meeting.
Gross.
And the weather isn't always conducive to riding your bike on the trails. Not everybody can ride a bike, so the Greenway is great, but not the 100% answer. Needless to say, biking isn't a universal solution, so Greenway's great, but multimodal public transportation or ways to get in and around town is going to become increasingly important, and we need to start thinking about it now. Again, Northwest Arkansas Regional Planning Commission has a line item about public transportation, and maybe you'd like to check it out on their website. I'm curious if you've lived in other cities. In your opinion, what type of population do we need to have, or population density, so many people per square mile, in order to justify a rail system, in order to justify more loops for Ozark Regional Transit? Ozark Regional Transit is free, so maybe they're going to start charging you $1 to go ride somewhere. 700,000, 800,000, maybe 1 million people in a population density of 15,000 people per square mile. Maybe that's when it makes sense to have a more robust public transit system. Next on our list is Northwest Arkansas falling behind when it comes to attractions. Northwest Arkansas punches way above its weight compared to many other cities and regions that we see across the country. For instance, we're not deficient when it comes to art, museums, Razorback athletics, Arkansas Music Pavilion, and of course, being the mountain biking capital of the world here in Bentonville, we have multiple trails, connector trails, single-track mountain biking trails, a hill assist chairlift up in Bella Vista. Of course, we have golf courses and lakes. When you start to compare our area to more larger metros like Kansas City or Nashville, and we start falling behind, we might have a few holes. And some may say that are watching this video, Anthony, we don't need any more stuff coming to Northwest Arkansas. There's plenty enough for everything to do. But let's go ahead and divulge just a little bit and talk about a few things. One example would be we don't have a metropolitan zoo. Now, there's probably someone right now in the comments saying, Anthony, we don't need a zoo. I understand that, but that's not the point. We have smaller attractions. Of course, if you travel all the way out to Turpentine Creek in Eureka Springs, there's that zoo-type feel. And if you were a longtime resident, sometime between the 70s and March of 2022, you know that the Gentry Wildlife Safari used to be a pretty cool place to go drive through and see some wildlife also. But Northwest Arkansas doesn't have the equivalent of a metropolitan zoo like they maybe have in Omaha, Nebraska. Again, my point being that when we start comparing to larger metropolitan areas, there's things that Northwest Arkansas doesn't have yet that many of those markets already do. Some would say we need a large children's museum or a major science museum. If you look over by Crystal Bridges, we've got the Scott Family A Museum that focuses on both a children's museum and kind of a science and technology museum. We don't have a large water park like Oceans of Fun up in Kansas City. There's no destination amusement park, but many locals here, we go drive over to Silver Dollar City and ride roller coasters over there. Some would say we need more indoor recreation than we do outdoors. Because Arkansas naturally has so much to do outside, we need more to do inside. What about spectator attractions? Should we build a Formula One course, or how about a NASCAR track? Now, of course, I don't believe we need those things, but it's certainly something that is an attraction bringing people here versus people here going somewhere else. Again, however you feel about that one way or the other, that's why we're having this conversation. NWA has a ton to do, but much of it, as mentioned, is centered around the outdoors, arts, and of course the Razorbacks. In regards to attractions, are we falling behind when it comes to having a 1 million person population here by 2050? It depends on how you look at it.
Depends on what?
Are we falling behind when it comes to professional sports? I don't think so. But do the Razorbacks really fill the gap for everyone? Doesn't fill for me. I don't plan on calling those hogs, but if you're not a local and you want to know what that sounds like, James, go ahead and roll that footage quickly. Obviously, we have the Northwest Arkansas Naturals down in Springdale, but let's be real, since they came to town, and for as long as I've lived here, about 13, 14 years now, I've maybe only been to 3 or 4 Naturals games. And as mentioned, we have something most similar sized regions don't. We have SEC athletics, so whether you're a Razorback fan or not, I absolutely would love to go watch a Razorback baseball game. We've taken our kids to go watch indoor and outdoor track events, gymnastics events, and of course Razorback Stadium can create an atmosphere that feels a lot like professional sports than it does college athletics. So perhaps Northwest Arkansas doesn't necessarily need a Major League Baseball team, an NBA team, or even an NFL team. But what about professional soccer? Ozark FC plans on making their debut. It used to be in 2026, but they've changed locations and now going to plan on making their debut in 2028. We don't have minor league hockey. What about that? What about professional women's sport? Are there additional minor league teams, no matter what the sport is? Should we bring them here to Northwest Arkansas to, one, fund the fan base, but also help with spectator sports? So I don't think that Northwest Arkansas is going to bring the Dallas Cowboys anytime soon. And to dispel some rumors, Northwest Arkansas is not going to bring the Kansas City Chiefs here.
That's too bad.
They now are going to have their new stadium over in Kansas. But frankly, I'm not sure that we would need either of them to really support a fan base here in Northwest Arkansas. But as we approach here in the next 25 years, nearly 1 million residents, I would be surprised if the Northwest Arkansas Naturals or the Ozark United Soccer Club are going to remain our only meaningful professional sports franchises. Let's get into retail a little bit. Is Northwest Arkansas falling behind when it comes to retail? And if you've been watching my channel long enough, you know what I'm going to say in this section. I know you know that. But this is where I would probably be careful. Northwest Arkansas is doing very well with restaurants, but it's population growth that creates demand for variety, not just the number of restaurants. We've gotten very good at announcing other restaurants coming to Northwest Arkansas, but there's a difference between having more restaurants and having a depth of restaurants that you'd expect from a 1 million person metro. If you're a local, think with me for a minute on ethnic cuisine, chef-driven concepts, fine dining, late night dining, neighborhood restaurants, specialty grocery stores, or international markets. You know, personally, I would love to see an In-N-Out Burger here, and of course, I'd love to see a Costco here in Northwest Arkansas. That's a whole different story and probably going to pop in the comments about something. But let's talk about specialty grocery here for a second. Of course, we have Walmart, and we have Harps, which is a regional grocery chain. But for instance, my daughter wanted to make a specialty tea that's more of an Indian culture type of tea. We can't go to our local neighborhood Walmart and just go buy the ingredients we need. We had to go to a specialty market that we actually do have to get the ingredients we need to make the tea exactly how our neighbors made it, who kindly invited us to enjoy it the other day. And the same goes for retail. We have the Pinnacle Hills Promenade, plenty of national retailers. But as household income and populations increase, I would expect a demand for more luxury retail, specialty retail, flagship stores like Nebraska Furniture Mart, IKEA, high-end home design retailers. With a population of 1 million people someday, why should someone in Northwest Arkansas have to drive to Kansas City, Tulsa, or Dallas to buy something that our metro could really support on its own? Is Northwest Arkansas falling behind when it comes to parks and recreation? Let's be honest, the trail systems alone aren't enough. This one surprised me a little bit in the research. Northwest Arkansas has become nationally known, of course, for outdoor recreation. Yet there's local park officials that have openly acknowledged that existing recreational facilities aren't sufficient for 1 million residents. Yes, Bentonville has a community center, and then Rogers has an adult wellness center. Lifetime Fitness is announcing they're planning on bringing one of their facilities to the Pinnacle Hills area. When we lived in Minnesota, actually right down the street from the home office of Lifetime Fitness, they have an absolutely beautiful facility with an outdoor swimming pool and amenities, which as a triathlete returning to the sport, I would love more lane swimming in Northwest Arkansas versus swimming down and back in the same lane with multiple other people and running into each other. Centerton's building their community center, but is that going to be enough with so much growth happening? Are we thinking ahead of that? Like the Northwest Arkansas Airport, they're thinking ahead for what's coming. Are we doing that in regards to our sports complexes? Are we thinking ahead enough in regards to our parks and recreation? Being the mountain biking capital of the world doesn't automatically mean that we have enough soccer fields for Timmy to play soccer on a Tuesday night. That is a very different infrastructure conversation. Is Northwest Arkansas falling behind when it comes to housing? I, as a real estate broker, love this section, of course, but the real issue here isn't can we build more $800,000 houses? Can we build more $2 million houses? No, we've got that covered. But as a real estate broker, and many natives are noticing, is that we're pricing out the people it takes to run the region. We need teachers, firefighters, police officers, nurses, restaurant employees, construction workers, city employees, retail workers, and young professionals. Again, we can build $1 million house, but many of those people are nowhere near paid enough. But nowhere near paid enough in order to afford the $1 million house. We can build those all day long. Are we building enough $300,000 and less? Are we building enough of those houses? And I don't think so. You're probably noticing around town that Roush Coleman, Schubert Mitchell, D.R. Horton, Lennar, many of our higher production home builders are just chomping at the bit. There's neighborhoods that are poised to pounce. But are we getting ahead of ourselves when it comes to building those neighborhoods for the people and the growth that's coming without getting the first issue taken care of the infrastructure. And it's not just the house price. You have to combine that house price because, as we know in our region, the closer you are to I-49, the closer you are to the city centers of downtown Bentonville, downtown Rogers, Springdale, is the home prices in those areas are extremely elevated. So that person that can afford that $300,000 house is not living close to town. They're spending more time in their car. They're needing public transportation. If the affordable house is 40 minutes from the job, the family is paying the difference in gasoline, automobiles, and time. That means, my friend, that housing and transportation aren't two separate conversations. They're part of the same thing. The biggest problem I would see if Northwest Arkansas is falling behind is that we are one large region of many small cities. Politically, we don't operate as one region. Bentonville plans for Bentonville, Rogers plans for Rogers. Springdale, Fayetteville, Centerton all plan for Springdale, Fayetteville, and Centerton separately. Same goes for Bella Vista. Of course, there's the Northwest Arkansas Regional Planning Commission. That's a great cohesive group of people that are talking about our region's problems as a whole, but I think there needs to be more cohesiveness between each city government. As mentioned before in previous videos, roads don't stop at the city limits. Sewer, electrical lines don't stop at the city limits. We all have to work together to make sure that we're planning everything for the future and prioritizing what makes the most sense. That said, I don't think our biggest challenge over the next 25 years isn't finding another $1 billion to develop the area. I think the challenge becomes helping coordinate and making sure all of these 20 plus little communities all work together cohesively. Of course, that's already beginning to happen when it comes to regional transportation, water, and growth planning, but coordinating that growth between all those cities is going to become even more important. None of this means that Northwest Arkansas needs to become Dallas. It doesn't need to become Austin. Is it on that trajectory? Some would say yes. Part of what makes Northwest Arkansas feel amazing is that we may have the opportunity of a major metropolitan area without feeling like we live in one. Question is, are we going to be able to keep that feel? Some would say we've already lost it. Additionally, if the projections are right, there's going to be another 400,000 people here in the next 25 years. We can either plan for the next 25 together cohesively or spend the next 25 years trying to catch up. If you would, down in the comments, I would love to hear from you. What does Northwest Arkansas need? What does it not need? Either way, my friend, it's always a pleasure to put this information together for you, and now you know a little bit more about what life is like in around Bentonville. Thanks for watching.